All right. Good afternoon. Welcome to Eaton Radio. My name is Jameel Hamilton. I go by the preferred title of Radio Human here at Eaton Hotel. I'm joined by a very special guest today. We have Dhruv Sangare. Did I pronounce that correctly?
Perfectly.
Perfectly. Wonderful. And he is a musician who sings or performs. Would you characterize your music as Sufi in nature?
Yes, Sufi music and Qawwali music.
Qawwali
Yeah.
music. Well, before we get into that, I want to talk about who you are, what does Dhruv mean,
Great.
and how you got to us today. So, where were you born?
Okay, wow. That's pretty good. That's a pretty clear approach. So I was born in New Delhi, India, and I guess I find myself in Washington, D.C. here with you today.
Okay.
So thank you.
All right, you were born in New Delhi, and I know a little bit about your parents were both creative people. So you grew up in a creative household.
Very much. My dad was, he worked for the hotel industry, but he was a very prolific painter. And so my mother was a scholar, and she did a lot of work, a lot of pioneering work in comparative literature and gender studies back in the day. And so we grew up around a lot of creative people. And I guess I was very blessed that we lived in a time when there were not so many boundaries between intellectuals, artists, performers, activists, and so people were always milling around each other, you know. And so I think almost every great artist, intellectual, and activist of our times in India probably hung out with my parents at some point. So I guess I was very blessed and fortunate that I had that milieu as a child.
And is that what inspired you to pursue singing?
I think it allowed for the possibility of a life outside a straitjacketed, existence. And so it allowed the possibility for me to dream of something which perhaps the generation before could not or did not have the luxury of. Since India was just coming out of this whole partition and freedom struggle phase. So survivalism was the main sort of aspect of their lives. And so by the time I was born in the 80s, I found that at least there were people who were saying, oh, we are artists and musicians, and, so that definitely that milieu and that thought helped me. And what also helped was the fact that there was so much music around. My grandmother was a very musical person, and my mother too. And we went to listen to every single legendary maestro in concert in the 80s and the 90s, and that helped a lot with my how do we say oral development as a creative person, and perhaps some momentous meetings too, inspired my journey into the world of music.
Momentous meetings?
Oh, sure. One of the most momentous meetings was right here in Seattle, actually.
Okay.
And that was with Ustad Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan. And Nusrat Fateh Ali Khan Sahab was the, how do we say,
he's like a
star of the Sufi music galaxy, right?
He's like the sun.
The son of that firmament of that galaxy.
Yeah.
And absolutely, I would say that, I was very lucky to have spent some time with him.
Really? And that influenced you, I'm sure, a great deal.
Hugely. I remember he was an artist in residence at the University of Seattle, and through some common friends, I happened to go meet him. And then he asked me to sing something, and then after that, the following year, I found myself in Lahore, in his hometown. His hometown was, of course, actually Lyallpur, which is a little further away, but he lived in Lahore. So I went, I stayed there, I spent time with him, learned from him and his younger brother, Ustad Farooq Fateh Ali Khan. And so it was pretty amazing, actually. I would say that those 2 years of my life became the what for me is something which is frozen in time, right? Something I'm constantly drawing on, learning from.
It's life changing, and it's
Life
part of
changing.
it's part of your identity as an artist.
Absolutely.
And so, working with Nusrat and self-identifying as a Sufi artist, what was that experience like in India versus being in like Pakistan?
I think India's strength is its diversity, right? Which is, as you may have heard, under attack these days in a big way politically. But traditionally, we have seen the development of a composite culture from the 1200s almost. So think about it, when there were crusades going on in the West, we had people like Amir Khusro saying neither Hindu nor Muslim, but a follower of the religion of love. Now, this is a very powerful idea. And so I would say that such a remarkable legacy is reposed in the heritage of Sufism in India, that it is truly the antidote to a lot of the bad stuff which is going on in the name of religion and caste and culture in India and around the world today. So for India, Sufism is a logical extension of its very ancient spiritual sort of experiment. We see Buddhism, Jainism, we see Sikhism coming up as a very syncretic sect also, where the elements of not just Islam but Sufism but also Vaishnavism and the Vedanta are being incorporated. So I think the first seeds of a kind of a world, I wouldn't say religion, but a world faith, are a universal faith, are seen in India, where the idea is that the truth is one, but there are various paths to it. Some paths can be musical, some can be, singular, some can be plural, some can be, poly, and some can be mono. However, it's all going to the same source. And so that is like a very powerful idea.
It's a true syncretism where it's not just religion and spirituality in a traditional sense. It's every aspect of the human experience that are being syncretized into something, into a way of being.
Indeed. I mean, the Sufis, they understood that the Indian subcontinent had a very powerful musical tradition. And music was the way people invoked the idea of the divine. And so our spiritual grandmaster, Khwaja Muinuddin Chishti, who came to India in the 1200s, in the 1100s actually, he refused to accept patronage from kings, because now, so we speak of activism today, but think about the activism of the Sufis, who said that the service of humanity is the service of the divine. So their notion was that our knowledge is democratic. We want to give our knowledge, our help, and our company to the public at large. We don't want to become part of the trappings of the state. We don't want to
become courtiers and
become courtiers and advisors to kings, although we may do well there too, because kings need good advisors.
Correct.
That's also a fact. But the Chishtis have always believed, the Chishti Sufis, who started Qawwali in South Asia, also always believed that kingship and royalty and politics was something best stayed away from. And so they used to settle down in the most remote areas, most geographically challenging locations with very poor people, and serve among them. And they never said convert to this religion or convert to that religion. They said we belong to everybody. Everybody belongs to us. So those people who, with their own inner calling, decided to follow a particular religion, they became part of that religion. Others were all, they were treated equally, and this is this has been a hallmark of Sufi tradition in India, and this has been unique also. I mean, it's not something you find everywhere in the world. So that is something which is valuable, and it has to be preserved. But unfortunately, it's also got caught up in our times and its politics and its, and its violence. But I would say that Qawwali is the very is the very embodiment of the pluralistic, syncretic, spiritual heritage of South Asia. And I guess I feel very lucky that I was given guidance in it by the best people possible,
Right.
and that I can share that with people around the world today. And I don't think everybody gets to do what they want in life. So I guess I'm just very, very lucky person at the end of the day. Yeah.
And so that you bring those things to your practice, the sense of understanding that Sufism lends itself to, and also your gratitude for being allowed to do this work. Because I hear that same sentiment from a lot of artists. It's just that it's a privilege to be able to do
Yes.
the thing that you love to do.
Absolutely. I would say art is surely a way to, how do we say, perceive the ultimate reality, you know. And the Sufis always say that sama, or the way what they describe Sufi music as, they say that if Sufis don't listen to sama, they will suffer a spiritual death in just 4 days. So for the Sufis, sama or music is very important. However, a Qawwali musician, his role or her role is to help the Sufi in their journey towards their goal. So the journey of the spiritual seeker, or one who's following a suluk or salik as he or she is known, is a very esoteric one. Is the inner journey, you know, like there is a notion that the inner and the outer are just mirror images, right? There is a cosmos within and there's a cosmos without. And so the resonance in that, the vibration, is unique for each soul. And however, its result or its end result or its purpose, if there is one, is to lead you to the source of that vibration and that energy. And
is that an individual thing, or is that for the community of people that experience your music?
I think it's both ways. So for the individual Sufi who is on that path, music is one crutch or one aid they use, right, to enhance their spiritual practice, to elevate their state. A very famous story is that Mahatma Gandhi, just days before he was assassinated, went to the shrine of a Sufi saint for their urs, or their death anniversary. A very famous saint known as Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki in Delhi, near the famous Qutub Minar of Delhi. And the story of Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki is that, and see how it resonates with the story of Gandhi, that Qutubuddin Bakhtiyar Kaki heard 2 lines being rendered by a Qawwal during the Sama ceremony taking place in front of him, and then he went into a spiritual coma after hearing those 2 lines, and he passed away. Right? And those lines are very interesting. Those lines are in Farsi, but in English they mean those who are slain by the dagger of submission to the divine, to the ultimate reality, those who are able to perceive the ultimate reality, or who are lucky enough to perceive it while they still live in the world. They never die, because each moment brings to them a new life from the unseen world, right? And then 4 days later, Gandhi is shot, right? So these things are all tied into each other. I mean, this is beyond all notions of religion or art as a innately creative pursuit. If art doesn't affect you deeply inside, I mean, a lot of people will say, oh, art just has no purpose. I'm collecting all this stuff so I can sell it at a higher price 20 years later, right? But is really that what art is all about?
No, art has always had utility for the human spirit.
Absolutely. So that's surest way. I mean, nature is the art of God, and what we create is an ode to it. So same with the music.
That's interesting, because you hear people saying, "Oh, people treat art as though it's something that's frivolous or luxury or non-essential, when it really is central to the human experience."
You would die so fast without art. We don't even know, right? Right?
And
We
you
don't-
can't even get away from art. Everything
No.
you experience in this world,
Yeah.
even this table we're sitting at, was
This is,
designed by
yeah.
someone. Someone put some thought into
Yeah.
the creation of this object that we now use. It has
Yeah.
utility,
Mm-hmm.
but it is also an object of beauty and
Absolutely.
a result of the human spirit. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely.
you know, when you hear people say, "Oh, well, art's just a thing," you know, it's not something that's essential like food. I'm like, it's much more than that.
Indeed.
So you're traveling. You're on tour.
I have been on tour, yes. This tour began on the 2nd of February.
Okay.
And so the group behind this tour is known as Reed Society. Now, the reed is the pen, right?
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, the reed has so many meanings in Sufism. Of course, you can dip a reed into ink and you can write beautiful calligraphy with it. There's another reed which Rumi talks about, the famous Mevlana Rumi,
Of course.
who was one of the most translated Sufi poets in the world. And he says that what does the reed flute lament of when the wind rushes through it and it is played? It laments of its separation from the reed bed, right? So now think about it. There's a reed which is, you know, chilling with all its other reeds in a reed bed,
Right.
And the wind goes through it, and then there's a little sound, and then one day somebody says, "Oh, this is a nice reed. I'll use it. I'll cut it into half.
Mhm.
I'll use the top tip for the flute,
Right.
you know, and the bottom for a quill." So it's incredible, right? If you were to think about it, the flute and the pen are so there's such a deep connection there, and it's an analogy for the soul,
Mm.
which is separated from the creator. So the soul is living with the creator,
Mhm.
right, as part of the whole.
Right.
And then suddenly it's sent into this body which it animates. While the body is enjoying the fruits of the life in the world,
Mhm.
the soul is always yearning to turn back.
To return to your creator.
And if you think about it,
Mm.
in Vaishnav Hinduism, Krishna is the flute player, right? He's playing the flute. So whenever he plays that flute, everybody drops what they're doing and are immediately enraptured and lost in the thoughts of returning to the source. So for Rumi, returning to the source is essential, and that is indeed it's the trajectory of life itself. I mean, you know, in Islamic prayer, and in even other prayer forms of the world, when people bow, prostrate, that's also a sort of symbol for saying returning to the source,
Correct.
right? So there are so many of these things which are so linked, and I feel that learning languages and learning different forms of art and music which are associated with each other is very, very essential for becoming a musician, because musicians are not just entertainers. So, you know, I mean, the whole purpose of this tour came about when I was invited by Princeton to perform at what they call the Mawlid, which is to celebrate the birth of the beloved Prophet of Islam.
Mhm.
And from that, this tour comes about, right? So here too, the reed has more than one purpose, right? More than one utility. And there are two events in Washington which I would be very, very happy to see you and your listeners at, hopefully.
Okay.
And
Tell us about those.
definitely, and one of them is at the GW, the George Washington University, at the Morton Auditorium, and that's happening on the 9th of February.
That's very soon.
Very, very soon indeed. And the tickets for that are available on Eventbrite. And the other one is at the Kennedy Center on the 11th at the Millennium Stage. So now you would say, but if you're a Qawwal, where is your group? So the other thing is that Washington D.C. has its very own
Mhm.
Sufi ensemble, which has been created by great efforts of several people, and so we call it the National Sufi Ensemble. So they will be featuring on this tour,
Oh, wonderful.
and it's a totally interfaith group with Hindus, Muslims, Christians,
Mhm.
Sikhs, all faiths who are coming together to celebrate the power of music, right? And Sufi music has also been called the jazz of the East. So there is something very beautiful about different communities coming together to celebrate a very, very intangible, diverse, yet powerful form of music. And so we really hope to showcase the best of Sufi music to audiences here during this tour.
So one more time, you're going to be at George Washington University at the Morton Auditorium on the 9th.
Yes.
And the Kennedy Center on the 11th.
Yes, that's
and
right.
both tickets are available
at Eventbrite.
At Eventbrite. So they look up Dhruv, and that's spelled DHRUV.
RUV.
Sangari, SANGIRI.
ARI.
ARI.
SANGARI. Yes.
Perfect. And so yeah, I'm hoping the local community of music lovers can endeavor to check out your performances while you're here.
Thank you. Hope to see you there too.
I'm going to definitely try to make it.
Wonderful.
And I appreciate you coming in today.
Well, thank you.
And yes, thank you again for your time.
Thank you very, very much. And I'm very glad that I was invited here. I hope to come some other time again, hopefully.
We have to have you back to perform here at the Eaton as well. I would love to do that.
Lovely, lovely. Maybe I'd like to jam with you.
Absolutely.
That would be cool.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
All right. And we're clear.
Great.
Stop the screen.
Was that all right?
That was perfect. I mean, it was